Not so long ago, I thought, I want a Resident Evil-like game on the Nintendo Switch, even if it's not Resident Evil. Well, I got it! A game that I didn't even know existed until a few weeks ago, or maybe a little more than a few weeks ago. Randomly browsing the Japanese eShop and see this game that looks like the original Resident Evil games. Well, it came west. I got a review copy, and I've been going through it over and over and over and over. A mix between the randomly generated dungeons genre and classic Resident Evil. Here is my review of Vaccine for the Nintendo Switch. The basic premise of Vaccine is that your friend has succumbed to a strange viral illness that is slowly morphing them into some sort of monster. You have 30 minutes until the illness takes hold, and you're in a mansion where you know there is a vaccine somewhere, an antidote that will cure them. So you head out into the mansion, dodge and fight your way through other infected that have already turned, hoping to get to that vaccine in time to help your friend. Now, there are a lot of interesting points about this story. Yeah, you're given this premise, but there are notes all over the game that give you backstory. You know, kind of like there was in Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. You find notes and then you find a little bit of backstory about what's going on. And it's interesting because this is kind of like a zombie type game, but the actual plot line deviates a lot from typical zombie games for the reason of the infection. I won't spoil anything, but it's quite interesting to read through once you find all the notes. In terms of gameplay, Vaccine is basically a cross between classic Resident Evil gameplay, we're talking about Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 from the PS1 era, and the randomly generated dungeon aspect of games like The Binding of Isaac. As you start a 30-minute run, you spawn in a room with a knife, and then you go out into the mansion looking for this vaccine. Every room you go into is randomly generated, and all of the items and enemies in those rooms are randomly generated. You might have a chest room as the first room, and it might be completely empty. On your next run, you might find the same hallway, 3 or 4 rooms in, filled with enemies or filled with items. Everything is random. Now, to me, this sounded pretty simple. Okay, knife in the first room, so I've always got a weapon. I'm used to doing knife-only runs in the original Resident Evil games, so this will be a piece of cake. And it really wasn't. Regular zombies are easy to fight. The animals are semi-easy to fight. You know, like bats and rats, flying enemies, enemies that are on the ground that you have to aim down for. But there's one enemy that makes it extremely difficult for a couple different reasons. One enemy is on all fours and runs up to you, kind of like, I could compare it to the Chimeras from Resident Evil 1, or the Lickers from Resident Evil 2, except they don't jump. They run up to you and attack you, but the problem is, they're faster than you, so you cannot outrun them, and they attack you faster than you can attack them. And this causes a problem. Because, I mean, yes, there is an RPG element in the game where you gain experience and can increase your stats, so you could like increase the damage you deal to them or decrease the damage they deal to you. But you're still not walking away from an encounter with just one of these without taking a huge amount of damage. This makes the difficulty extremely high. To add on to this, in my personal experience, items appearing in dungeons being weapons, as in firearms and first aid kits, health items, have been extremely rare. I have played probably 4 or 5 dozen runs of the game, and across all of those runs, I think I only found a handgun 2 or 3 times, and I only found a health item once. Sure, I found lots of stamina items, but that's not going to help you when you're getting pelted with damage from this Licker or Chimera-like enemy. Because there's a big difference between doing this in Resident Evil 2 and doing this in Vaccine. Now, before we kind of deviate and go to another section, let's talk about length. Obviously, one run cannot take you more than 30 minutes, or you'll automatically lose because your friend's infection will turn them into a monster. But, given the time it takes to learn the system, try different things out, learn the system if you're not a veteran of the original Resident Evil games, it really just turns that 30 minutes into hours and hours and hours. I would say even a Resident Evil veteran might take 5 to 10 hours just to be able to beat the game once, let alone try to beat it again. So you're definitely getting length worth out of your money here. Now, there's nothing wrong with the controls, but I feel the need to talk about it. This game heavily mimics the classic Resident Evil games, which means that it mimics the ones from the PS1 era. It does not mimic the Resident Evil 1 remake that released on the GameCube, Wii, PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. Those had enhanced controls that you could use to navigate. Vaccine has classic tank controls, where you press up on the directional button to walk forward and you have to hit left or right to turn before you can actually move in another direction. Just letting you guys know, classic Resident Evil fans will see this coming. Other people might not. Now let's talk about presentation. The presentation looks dated. It looks like a PS1 game, as it should. All of the environments in all of the rooms are pre-rendered, just like Capcom did with the original Resident Evil games. The only 3D items on screen are enemies, items, and your character. The models even have the jagged edges on screen where the original Resident Evil models had on screen. And they even included a TV graphics mode option. Because when Resident Evil first came out back in the 90s, people were still using a lot of CRT TVs that had a lot of staticky lines on it. And by default, there's a graphics setting that has those staticky lines, whether you're in TV mode or handheld mode, to further simulate exactly what people saw when they first played the Resident Evil games back in the 90s. You can turn it off, of course, but it's just a little detail that's really neat and I really didn't expect. Now, as far as performance goes, no problems. The frame rate is extremely smooth, loading sequence practically non-existent. The next surprise, though, comes out of the next section. The battery life section. Now, let's talk about that. This game has PS1 graphics. I expected battery life to be stellar. More than stellar. I expected it to rival for one of the longest battery times in a Nintendo Switch game. As you're about to find out, I was very wrong about that. Here are my times from 100% battery to 0% battery. Maximum brightness with Wi-Fi on, 2 hours and 21 minutes. Maximum brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 2 hours and 36 minutes. Lowest brightness with the Wi-Fi on, 2 hours 54 minutes. Lowest brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 3 minutes. Now I want you to think about that for a minute. I'm going to tell you that again and read it on screen again. With max settings, 2 hours and 21 minutes of battery life. That's even less battery life than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. How does this happen? How does a game with pre-rendered backgrounds and PS1 level graphics use more battery life than Zelda Breath of the Wild? Now, in conclusion, Vaccine is a very difficult survival horror take on the randomly generated dungeon genre. On the downside, the difficulty is perhaps a bit too high with the random element not dropping firearms very often, and the battery life is a lot less than it ought to be. But hey, if you're looking for classic Resident Evil on the Switch, this will definitely give you that feel, and if you're looking for a challenging Resident Evil on the Switch, then you should definitely give this a go. Reviews to Go rates Vaccine for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below or head to the website at www.reviewstogo.com.